I've been thinking about for a long time. It's kind of a physics test in Gran Turismo to understand how Drivetrain influenced the lap times under comparable weight and output horsepower. So in the first part I'll be comparing three cars with similar weight and horsepower. Those are Honda NSX Type R, Toyota Supra Mk4 and VW GTI Mk7. So NSX has a mid-engine rear-wheel drivetrain. Supra, on the other hand, is a front-engine but rear-wheel drive car. Those two were produced in the same 1990s era, where there was an internal agreement in Japanese market where cars had comparable engines and output powers, whereas Mk7 is a modern hot hatch. I'm driving a daily GTI TCR, so with the tweaks it will act similar to the real car, and I will try to understand how these cars compare in a technical circuit, that is Willow Springs, Streets of Willow. So that will be the second part, the first part. The second part I will be comparing Bugatti Veyron to Porsche Taycan TurboS. Both of those cars have four-wheel drivetrains. Veyron obviously has a massive engine on the back. It's a mid-engined hypercar, whereas Taycan has batteries which should be laid on the floor, and I'll try to understand whether those cars and then the engine location versus the weight distribution will have a pronounced effect on the lap times. So the first one that I'm going to drive is the original NSX. I don't have a gaming rig, so I will always use the automatic transmission. I'm using the DualShock 4 controller, and this is running on PlayStation Pro. Just to recap on the specs, so I'll be using Sport Soft tires across all comparisons. In the initial set of comparisons, the cars weigh around 1,260 odd kilos, and the output power will be 284 horsepower. And then for the final gearing, I will always keep them exactly on the middle, and then the maximum speed will always be limited to 150 kilometers an hour. But that's not an issue for this track, where you don't have extremely long straights to push that anyway. So often people kind of criticize Gran Turismo for the poor audio quality, but I feel like in the recent updates the cars feel much more unique and closer to real life. One can feel the body roll, but NSX is really planted here, so there's a bit of understeer there, but So 124 200. I will also observe the replay with commentary to see how the real character of the car is reflected in the game. So we can turn on all the... Actually, the body roll is very minimal in NSX, and it felt really planted, and it was relatively easy to drive. So I'm not pushing lap time, so I'm just setting a casual lap time, hoping that if there are any errors or biases, it will be randomly distributed. So I don't have a hidden agenda to make one of these cars faster than the other. Yeah, actually, as we can see, the body roll is very well managed in those kind of tight left-right corners. Yeah, here a little bit oversteer, and final corner. So what I'll do now is I'll try the same with Supra Mk4. Recently I've driven the Mk5 in a test drive, so if you guys are interested in my impressions, it's also available on my channel, and how that car compares to my daily driver, which is a GTI TCR. It's a really legendary shape, and I feel like they reflected the essence of this Mk4, but obviously it's just a nice base car and it would benefit from lots of tweaks. So what we have here is that, again, the weight is 1268 kilos, 283 horsepowers. Yeah, it should have been 86, just like the SX. Sport soft tires, maximum speed limited to 250 kilometers an hour, and then the final gearing ratio is again in the middle of for this car. So I don't want to do too much optimization for each car, which I think will defeat the point. So this is like a plug and play kind of test. So the target time is 124 200s. A lot of understeer there. One can immediately feel like the fact that the engine is on the front of the car kind of gives that additional weight and understeer character. Yeah, definitely feels like more difficult to drive than the NSX. rather interesting. So we were actually 0.3 of a second quicker in the Supra, but doing so it felt much more difficult car to drive. So let's see the replay. Yeah, we can see here that the car understeers. From that perspective, the character of the car, the fact that engine is located in the front, is reflected well. It didn't have too much oversteer or wheel spin coming out from the corners, but it did feel a little bit more difficult car to drive. Obviously, I think NSX is a little bit wider and lower overall, and in real life we all know that its development was influenced by Ayrton Senna. So from the get-go it feels more like a track-oriented car to begin with than Supra, which is commonly known as a drag strip king. But rather interestingly, under same weight and horsepower output, we were able to set a time much quicker with Supra than NSX. So the next comparison will be, I think, interesting. We don't have Civic Type R in this game, and recently in 5th gear they had a comparison between the original NSX Type R and modern Civic Type R, and in that comparison, in another technical track, the modern Civic hot hatch was quicker than the original NSX, kind of showcasing the advancement of the hot hatch genre as general. So I have a soft spot for GTIs anyway, so I will be comparing GTIs to represent that category of front-engined, front-wheel drive cars. So we can see the Club Sport S side strips that I made some time ago. So just to recap again, the weight output is comparable down to the last digit, 286 horsepower, sport soft tires, 250 kilometers maximum speed limiter, and then the mid setting for the final gearing. So if there's an element of truth in that comparison done by 5th gear, you should also be able to see this in the GTI, and then target time is 1:24. Considerable understeer there, and then the suspension feels so soft relative to the other cars. The body roll is fairly noticeable. Induction noise is kind of nice. That's kind of interesting, yes. So actually we were faster in the modern hot hatch than the sports cars, or for NSX we can say it was a supercar in 1990s. So we were faster in the modern hot hatch than the other two. The comparison between NSX is 7/10 of a second, so it's a considerable margin in such a short track. But we can see that there is immense body roll. Suspension is very, very soft, which can work in favor of the car in some conditions. For example, we know that VW has used a relatively softer suspension setting while they were trying the Nürburgring lap record with Club Sport S. So it allows you to have more traction over the curbs, and the car would obviously become less bouncy, but it might also suffer from the weight transfer, as we see in these situations as well. There's a lot of weight transfer to the front under heavy braking. Almost this aspect of it doesn't feel realistic. But obviously front-engined, front-wheel drive train is not something that you would want in a racetrack. Everything is done by the front axle basically. Steering, power, heavy weight transfer on the front axle again under braking. But yeah. So the next set of comparison will be between Bugatti Veyron, which is a mid-engine all-wheel drive hypercar. I have this orange livery on it. So the power and the weight output of Veyron is tweaked a little bit so that it will be comparable to Taycan TurboS. So I just want to understand the effect of the weight, location, and the drivetrain overall on the lap times. If we look at the settings, so now the weight is 1869 kilos and the power output is 788 horsepower. Will be the same for both of these cars. Sport soft tires. Maximum speed is limited here for 400, otherwise Veyron stops to function properly, but the final gearing is right in the middle as before. I'm sure people usually don't track their Veyrons. But here we go. Immediately one can feel the massive weight, causing a lot of understeer in tighter corners. It's really a struggle to control this car, especially with sport soft tires. Maybe if we had racing super soft or something, the grip will be much better, but I want to keep the comparison to realistic because no one really has racing slicks put on these cars. Anyway, yeah, right under 118. So in terms of the ranking, obviously this is a little bit detuned version of Veyron, but yeah, 5.5 seconds faster than the modern hot hatch. Yeah, that feels just about right, considering how short this track is. Yeah, the proportions of this car really doesn't feel right in such a tight track as this one, but overall it really feels planted, and it should. I think for this lap the tires had been the letdown. Obviously there's a lot of power and weight to deal with on Sport Soft tires, but I just want to keep the comparison as similar as possible. Yeah, a little bit of understeer in tight corners as expected. Surely four-wheel drive train really helps with the grip on this car. So the target time will be roughly 118, and I want to see how Taycan will compare to this, because in principle the weight should be evenly distributed under the floor of the car, so the Taycan should have a better weight distribution. Obviously electric cars are a little bit better to put down the torque, and then the power output is the same, so on paper Taycan should be able to beat that time, but we'll see. Immediately it feels very tail happy, which is interesting. Body roll there. Considerable. A lot of understeer, so it couldn't even. Yeah, was interesting. So I lost a little bit time in the final corner. I'm wondering, maybe I should try one more lap with Taycan. So that really didn't feel right. I'm not car faster than Veyron, to be honest. But the final corner, it was obviously either I missed the braking zone or it simply didn't stop. Of squeaky tires. I think the problem with electric cars is just like real life. The acceleration is so wild and there's no engine sound to determine what's happening. So there's a little bit disconnect. Actually, on this lap, I think we were like half a second faster than Veyron, so it's really likely that the previous lap was kind of my fault because I missed the braking point or simply the car didn't stop reasonably quickly. So I know that I haven't shown the settings on this one, but just to rule out any suspicion. So the power output, again, 788 horsepower, 1858 kilos in weight, sport soft tires, and the final gearing, we cannot really do something about it because it's just fixed internally in the game. So if we see the replay now, immediately the car feels much more tail happy than Veyron. It kind of reflects the characteristic of a modern Porsche in that respect, and because it's electric, it's difficult to judge how fast one is entering the corners, and there's an always element of understeer because of the massive weight. But acceleration out of the corner is much better than Veyron from that perspective. Maybe we feel like there's more tire squeak with Taycan because there's no engine sound. That's a possibility. And in this corner, yeah, there's a little bit oversteer even. So the take-home message, I think it's good to see that the physics engine is internally consistent and kind of reflects what we would see in real life. Here we have the modern hot hatch much faster than a 90s sports car or supercars in that respect, if we consider NSX to be a supercar of the 90s. And this is kind of reflected in the same manner to a recent comparison done by Fifth Gear, in which they compared the Civic Type R to NSX. And apart from that, within the hypercar kind of power output field, we compared the Veyron, which is a mid-engined four-wheel drive hypercar, to Taycan TurboS, which is an electric car where the batteries should be laid down on the floor. Again, four-wheel drive and same power output. And in these kind of circumstances, the electric car performed half a second quicker, and the hot hatch performed 0.7 of a second better than NSX. So I feel like, although people often criticize Gran Turismo to be a arcade or simcade kind of game, I think the physics engine is internally consistent and it behaves as expected from that point of view. I think the body roll and softness of the suspension is a little bit exaggerated in GTI, but other than that, I think it is fairly good, and I'm sure that there will be further improvements and optimizations for Gran Turismo 7, and with addition of a larger library of cars, I think it could be a stellar game. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this content, please subscribe or like or share or comment. I'll try to respond as much as I can. Thank you very much.